There's a lot of talk about spiritual awakening, but almost no one tells you the truth. Awakening is not peace. It's the moment your old life stops working. You don't feel broken, you feel empty, lost. Like the meaning you used to live by suddenly disappeared. Carl Jung said this is not a crisis. It's the beginning of individuation, a psychological death that happens before you become whole. If this is happening to you, you're not failing. You're being initiated. And by the end of this video, you'll finally understand what your soul is asking of you. Outwardly, nothing changes. Work, routine, relationships, they go on. But inside, something starts to unravel. Meaning slips through the cracks of everyday life. And that's where the first stage of awakening begins. A deep, soul-level dissatisfaction. Like something in you is asking for what the outside world can't give. Carl Jung observed that individuation often begins with the collapse of what he called false peace. The persona, the social mask we wear to fit in, starts to crumble. And the breakdown doesn't happen on the surface. It happens inside. You feel like you're playing a role, but you're no longer in the story. Like you're stuck in a script whose lines have lost all meaning. This is the beginning of the fracture between who you've become and who, on some deeper level, you know you could be. The soul begins to stir. It doesn't offer answers. It shakes the foundation of what once felt certain. And if you try to ignore it, you'll notice something terrifying. The dissatisfaction doesn't go away. It grows. It seeps into your relationships, your work, your routines. It erodes everything false until something more real can emerge. Then comes the second stage, the search. That urgency to understand what's happening inside you becomes movement. You start exploring books, videos, philosophies, practices, spiritual paths, psychology, myth, meditation, anything that seems to touch the strange new territory opening up inside your chest. There's beauty here. A single sentence at the right moment can unlock something ancient in you. A meditation can bring peace where there was chaos. A symbol can appear again and again, a snake, an ocean, a door, a child, a shadow, like the psyche whispering in images because language is too small. At this stage, synchronicities begin to pile up. You stumble upon ideas that describe your experience with eerie precision. You find people speaking your private language. You start to feel, for the first time, that you're not alone. Others have walked this path and they left traces. Jung would call it the collective unconscious, this deep psychological reservoir of archetypes and patterns that humans share, and that awaken when your personal story starts dissolving into something larger. You experiment, you test, you taste. Ancient practices, modern practices, some are helpful, some are intoxicating. And here's the trap: spiritual overload. The ego, overwhelmed by inner chaos, can turn the search into consumption. The mind becomes drunk on content, while the soul remains untouched. You know the words, but you don't live the truth. You collect concepts like protective charms, hoping knowledge will spare you from the descent. But the goal isn't to stop seeking. It's to find balance, to learn what resonates in your body, what brings presence, what touches the essential, what is real, and what is distraction dressed in sacred language. And then, after all that seeking, something happens that doesn't come from where you expected. A dream that feels different, a sudden shiver that runs through you like a bell being struck. An intuition that lands with uncanny accuracy. Not dramatic, just undeniable. You feel it in the marrow. There is something here. This is the third stage, illumination. Contact with the self begins, not as an idea, but as a living experience. Jung described the self as the organizing center of the psyche, the blueprint of who you're meant to become. And it doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives slowly, through dreams, through creativity, through choices that later prove themselves true. You're still confused, still full of questions, but no longer lost in the same way. Something has shifted. Doubt remains, but now there's an inner compass forming, a quiet coherence beneath the noise. And because you've touched it, even briefly, the old life becomes impossible to fully return to. The self leaves a trace, a scent, a signature. And now, even when you don't understand, you know there's something inside you that does. Then comes the fourth stage, resistance. Human, inevitable. The ego, rattled by the cracks in the persona and the flickers of the self, tries to seize control again. It's afraid. It doesn't understand. It tries to return you to what's safe, old routines, old identities, old relationships, old beliefs. But they no longer fit. What once comforted you now suffocates you. So you hold on, out of fear, out of instinct, out of a desperate need to protect yourself from the unknown. Doubt becomes your defense. Skepticism becomes your shield. Was that real? What if I imagined it? What if I'm losing it? The signals get fuzzy. Dreams confuse. Intuition dims. The soul whispers, but the ego shouts. And in the middle of that noise, exhaustion sets in. The burnout of trying to be two people at once. Who you were and who you're becoming. If this is where you are, hear this clearly. Resistance is not failure. It's transition. The old self fights because it knows it's being left behind. And even when leaving sounds like freedom, it still hurts. It still confuses. It still drains. So this phase demands something rare. Patience with yourself. Not more information. Not another technique. Honesty. Honesty to admit you're afraid. Honesty to admit letting go hurts. Honesty to see that the mind is trying to protect what it knows. And when you stop trying to conquer resistance and start trying to understand it, something begins to soften. Because the thing resistance fears most, being seen, is exactly what needs to happen. And right here, before we go deeper, let's place a simple stone on the path together. Something small, effortless, but true. If you felt that quiet inner dissatisfaction, the sense that your old life no longer fits, comment one short sentence. I'm ready for what's real. Not for me, for you. Like a private vow written in public light. Now, once the ego loosens its grip, the next threshold doesn't knock. It enters. The fifth stage is the abyss, the meeting with the shadow. The unconscious rises to the surface, but it doesn't bring light. It brings everything you buried. Anger you never processed, fear you tried to rationalize, shame you covered with achievement, guilt you tried to cancel out with good behavior. It all returns, and it asks for presence. This is not punishment, it is integration. Jung said the shadow is made of everything the ego refuses to see as part of itself. But what is denied does not disappear. It hides. It waits. And when awakening begins, it surges with force. Because awakening is not about climbing toward light. It is about walking through the full darkness without abandoning yourself. You start noticing patterns that were always there, but now they hurt more. You react in ways you don't understand. You catch yourself saying things that don't match the version of yourself you built. And it can feel like madness, but it's revelation. The unconscious is putting the truth on the table. This descent is raw. No formula, no perfect guidebook, just courage. Jung once said the shadow is 90% gold, meaning inside what you reject lives the very power you've been looking for. Strength, creativity, authenticity, wholeness. everything you couldn't be, but that still lives somewhere inside. And as you stand at the edge of that abyss, something in you realizes the life you've been living was built to survive, not to become. And here's the question that changes everything. What if the part of you you're most afraid to face is the exact part that holds the key to your destiny? Because the shadow doesn't arrive politely. It arrives like a tide in the middle of the night, silent at first, then suddenly everywhere. It floods the rooms you thought were handled. It reaches into the drawers you labeled past, over, doesn't matter anymore. And it turns the light on without asking for your permission. You may begin to feel it in strange ways. A mood that drops without a clear reason. A sharp reaction that surprises you. A bitterness that tastes ancient. A memory you haven't touched in years rising like smoke from a match. Or the most unsettling of all, the realization that you've been living as a partial version of yourself, editing your truth so long that you forgot what the unedited voice sounds like. The shadow is not only the bad. People misunderstand that. The shadow is also your unused power, your forbidden confidence, your unexpressed desire, your suppressed tenderness, your hidden anger that was never allowed to become healthy boundaries, your hunger for a life bigger than the one you were told to be grateful for. If you grew up learning that love was conditional, you probably built a persona that could earn it. If you learned that being too much got you punished, you probably shrank. If you learned that your needs were inconvenient, you probably learned to disappear inside other people's expectations. And the persona worked for a while. It protected you. It helped you belong. It helped you survive. But awakening is the moment survival stops being enough. So when the shadow comes, it doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to return you to yourself. And that's why the abyss feels so intense. Because in the abyss, the ego loses its favorite weapon, denial. It can't keep saying, "I'm fine." Not when your body is telling the truth. Not when your dreams are demanding attention. Not when your heart refuses to be bribed by the same old distractions. You start to see the subtle ways you betray yourself, the little moments you abandon your truth to keep peace, the way you soften your voice so you won't offend, the way you swallow your needs so you won't be rejected, the way you pretend you don't care about what you care about because wanting too much feels dangerous. And now it hurts. It hurts because you can't unsee it. The illusion is cracking. In Jung's language, this is where the psyche pushes you toward wholeness. Not moral purity, wholeness. The ability to hold your contradictions without breaking. The ability to say, yes, I am light, and yes, I am shadow, and both belong. The ability to stop running from yourself like you're the enemy. If you stay with the process, something strange happens. There's pain, yes, but there's also a solidity, a sense of standing on real ground for the first time. Because the ground is not built from your performance, it's built from your truth. And then, after the abyss, the next stage arrives like winter. The sixth stage is the symbolic death of your former self. No one comes out of this unchanged. It's not just the end of a phase, it's the collapse of an identity. Everything you used to call me, your roles, your certainties, your inherited dreams, begins to unravel. At first, slowly, then all at once. And even if you longed for change, nothing prepares you for the feeling of losing yourself. This is where many people panic, because the mind wants labels, it wants certainty, It wants to say, I am this, my life means that, I know where I'm going. But in this stage, words stop fitting. Your old motivation vanishes. Desires lose color. Familiar goals feel strangely irrelevant. You try to describe yourself, but your description sounds like a biography of a stranger. You feel like the old sinner of you has become debris. And there's no new name yet, just silence. A thick silence, heavier than your body knows how to carry. People often mistake this void for failure, for depression, for a mistake. But Jung understood this chamber of the soul as necessary. Individuation demands the death of the ego's dictatorship so that the self can become the true center. Not erasing your personality, ending its rule, making space for something deeper to surface. This is the in-between, the sacred liminal place, the bridge between identities. And it is lonely, because no one can walk this part for you. Advice doesn't fit. A pre-made path doesn't help. You can't hack your way through it. The soul isn't asking for speed, it's asking for presence. So you sit in the emptiness. You listen to the absence. You learn to not immediately fill the void with noise. You learn to let the old self die without trying to resurrect it with nostalgia. And in that darkness, something is quietly happening, like a seed decaying before it sprouts. Something essential begins forming underground. Then, one day, without warning, a new breath arrives, small, fragile, but alive. This is the seventh stage, authentic individuality emerging. Not the old self returning, not a new persona to impress the world, a rawer presence, a clearer presence, a more alive presence. You're no longer trying to fit in, you're trying to be whole. And when you try to be whole, you stop negotiating your soul away. You make a more honest choice here, a truer answer there. You feel yourself becoming less willing to betray yourself for approval. You still have fear, you still hesitate, but you no longer abandon yourself as easily. The center of your identity shifts. It no longer orbits around status, validation, or inherited duty. A new axis forms, quiet but firm. It's like something inside you whispers, "This is me." Even if you still don't have the words. The ego is still there, but now it learns to serve, not lead. Intuition begins guiding you more. You act less from impulse and more from alignment. You respond from within, not from what others expect. And you begin to taste something rare, the peace of not pretending. Self-judgment loosens, comparison loses its grip. Emotional autonomy takes root, not as isolation, but as grounding. You realize you don't need external validation to exist. Now here, right around this point in the journey, many people feel something dangerous, a desire to rush ahead, to force the new life to appear immediately, to demand results from transformation, like the soul owes you a quick return on your pain. But awakening doesn't work like that. Awakening is not a negotiation, it's an initiation. And because you're in the modern world, because your attention is being hunted every day by endless noise, your awakening needs structure, not just inspiration. It needs practice, a container, a sequence of days where you choose yourself again and again until it becomes real. So let me offer you something, smoothly, without breaking this journey. If you feel this shift happening inside you, and you're ready to build your dream life in a grounded way, I want you to join the 21-day challenge linked in the description or pinned comment. It's not a fantasy. It's a daily practice, designed to help you turn inner clarity into outer change, step by step, with focus, discipline, and soul. If you've been waiting for a sign to stop living on autopilot, consider this your invitation. And now, we continue. Because once authentic individuality begins to rise, reality starts to respond. The eighth stage is when synchronicities become frequent. Jung described synchronicity as two events, seemingly unrelated, connecting through meaning. Life begins to mirror your inner movement, not as superstition, as resonance. You're no longer obsessively chasing signs. They show up naturally, unexpectedly, effortlessly. A line in a book answers the exact question you asked in your mind an hour ago. A stranger says a sentence that pierces you like prophecy. A symbol repeats until it feels like the universe has learned your private language. And the strangest part is this: it makes sense to you even if no one else understands it. It's not proof. It's not guarantee. It doesn't solve your life. It's a reminder. A reminder that your inner and outer paths have started to align. And when you trust these mirrors, not blindly but reverently, something in you relaxes. Not because you have certainty about the future, but because you feel the thread guiding you even when the plot is tangled. You begin to walk with a different kind of certainty. Not loud certainty, quiet certainty. The kind that doesn't need to convince anyone. And that is when life begins to rearrange itself, not as punishment, but as purification. Because what is not aligned with the real you cannot keep holding the same place. And then comes the next demand, one that will test everything you've learned. Because what happens when your soul becomes real is that your life starts asking a terrifying question. Are you willing to lose what no longer matches you, to finally become who you truly are? Because when authenticity becomes unavoidable, expression demands its place. This is the ninth stage of awakening, and it's one of the most misunderstood. People imagine awakening makes you calmer, softer, easier to be around. Sometimes it does, but more often it makes you truer. And truth doesn't always arrive gently, it arrives clean. You begin to speak differently, not louder, clearer. Your tone shifts, your pauses change. You stop over-explaining, you stop apologizing for existing. You start saying what you actually think, even when your voice trembles. You start choosing from what you truly feel, even when it destabilizes familiar dynamics. And yes, this has consequences. Some relationships loosen. Some end without a dramatic fight, just a quiet recognition that the old contract no longer applies. Some people don't recognize your frequency anymore. Not because you became cruel, but because you stopped shrinking. This is not rebellion, it's coherence. The social mask doesn't fall off in one dramatic moment. It dissolves slowly in everyday gestures. In the refusal to lie just to keep peace. In the silence where there used to be excuses. In the spontaneous laugh that no longer fits any role. In the decision to walk away without making the other person wrong. You will still slip. You will still catch yourself performing. Awakening doesn't erase conditioning, it loosens its grip. But now there's a new sensation when you betray yourself. Discomfort. A static inside your chest that didn't exist before. The soul has learned its own name, and it won't let you forget it. And when you honor that discomfort instead of numbing it, life begins to reorganize. Truer relationships appear, not perfect ones, real ones. Work starts to mean something different. You feel drawn toward environments where honesty is valued more than image. Your energy changes. You are no longer available for what drains you in slow, invisible ways. This is not isolation. This is alignment. And from alignment comes the 10th stage, direct contact with the self. Not as a theory, not as a philosophy, as a felt presence. Jung described the self as potential wholeness, the organizing center of the psyche. In this stage, it no longer appears only in flashes. It becomes your reference point, your axis. Not permanently, awakening is cyclical, but when it's present, everything changes. There's a quiet that doesn't depend on circumstances, a clarity that doesn't need explanation. You feel in yourself, not as an idea, but as a lived reality. Decisions stop feeling forced. Choices become clearer because they arise from stability rather than fear. The self does not shout. It does not rush you. It guides like a silent compass that always points north, even when the terrain is unfamiliar. Outer life may still be chaotic. Challenges still exist. Loss still hurts. But something inside you has landed. Comparison fades. Judgment loosens. The urge to control dissolves. The inner war quiets. There is listening now, and with listening comes trust. This is not enlightenment as escape. It's embodiment. You are not floating above life, you are rooted in it. You still feel fear, doubt, pain, but there is space around those feelings. They no longer own you. They pass through instead of consuming you. The self doesn't make you superior, it makes you whole. And wholeness carries a responsibility most people don't talk about. Because when you're no longer ruled by unconscious patterns, you begin to see something unsettling. You co-create your reality from your inner state. This is the 11th stage. Life starts to mirror what you hold within, not what you want, but what you are. Jung said the external world is, in large part, a projection of the inner one. That doesn't mean you imagine everything. It means your perception, your interpretation, your relationship to events shapes what they become for you. The same event can be a punishment or a doorway. A loss can be an ending or a liberation. A crisis can be collapse or initiation. Perspective becomes power. In this stage, blame loses its grip, not because nothing hurts, but because you see your role in the pattern. This is not about guilt, it's about agency. Consciousness becomes directional. Intention becomes creative. You stop reacting to life as if it's happening to you. You begin acting from clarity, from inner truth. And gradually the outer world responds. Not magically, naturally. Painful cycles end because you've stepped out of the internal loop that sustained them. Relationships shift because you no longer meet them from the same place. Opportunities align because your energy is no longer split. Co-creation is not manipulation, it's resonance. It's living with such presence that the world answers, not to your demands, but to your state of being. And then, quietly, something else happens. The search ends. Not because you found all the answers, but because the questions change. What once felt like a war between light and shadow dissolves into inclusion. There is no more urgency to fix yourself, no more obsession with becoming better. The polarity softens. This is the 12th stage, integration. Not a peak, a ground. A state that doesn't need a name, but can be felt as unconditional acceptance. Not sentimental love, not romantic love. Love as a frequency. Love as an atmosphere in which everything belongs. You look at yourself, and there is no longer an internal enemy. The parts that once brought shame are now held with understanding. The shadow doesn't need to hide. The ego doesn't need to win. Everything finds its place. And that acceptance extends outward. People stop being projects. You no longer need to fix, rescue, or correct them to feel safe. You see them as they are, walking their own night, carrying their own wounds. Judgment loses its purpose. Forgiveness stops being effortful. It becomes a natural consequence of understanding. You stop trying to be special. You start trying to be whole. And in that wholeness, you discover something essential. Freedom does not come from separating yourself from the world. It comes from integrating with it without losing yourself. The boundary between inner and outer softens. Life moves through you, and you move with it. There is no need to rush, no need to prove, no need to resist, just presence. This love is not an emotion. It is the result of everything you've walked through. The dissatisfaction, the search, the illumination, the resistance, the abyss, the death, the rebirth, the truth, the responsibility. And that is why it is not fragile. It is the quietest strength there is. Integration does not erase duality. It includes it. Light and shadow still exist, but they no longer fight. They recognize each other. And when that happens, you become whole. This is where awakening stabilizes, not as a moment, but as a way of living. Not as escape, but as embodiment. And when you look back, you realize something profound. It was never about reaching a higher state, never about escaping pain, never about becoming enlightened in the way the ego imagines. It was about returning to your body, returning to your truth, returning to the parts of you that were exiled in the name of survival. Individuation, as Jung described, is not perfection. It is the courage to become who you are, with all your contradictions, all your fragments, all your humanity, brought together into something real. And for that very reason, complete. You see now that awakening was never one moment. It was a process. A slow dismantling of illusions built to keep you safe, and a patient rebuilding of your essential truth. Every stage had its purpose. The call, the crisis, the shadow, the silence, the rebirth, the authenticity, the love. And love did not arrive as a reward. It arrived as a consequence of staying. Staying with yourself when it was uncomfortable. Staying when it was lonely. Staying when it would have been easier to numb, distract, or perform. Now you know. Awakening is not flipping on a light switch. It is learning to walk in the dark without abandoning yourself. It is giving up on perfection and choosing wholeness. And here is the final truth most people never hear. The life you are searching for is not waiting somewhere ahead of you. It is waiting for you to stop leaving yourself behind. Because the last illusion to fall is the belief that awakening is something you arrive at. It isn't. It's something you inhabit. When the dust settles, when the urgency quiets, when the hunger to become something else dissolves, you realize the journey was never about adding more to yourself. It was about removing what was never truly you. Layer by layer, expectation by expectation, fear by fear. What fell away was not your essence. What fell away was the version of you that learned to survive by hiding. And this is where awakening matures into responsibility. Not a heavy responsibility, a grounded one. Because once you've seen yourself clearly, once you've walked through the abyss and come back with your heart intact, you can no longer live unconsciously in the same way. You notice when you're lying to yourself. You feel when you're out of alignment. You sense when you're giving your energy to something that doesn't nourish you. And instead of judging yourself for it, you adjust. This is the quiet power of integration. You stop outsourcing your authority. You stop waiting for permission. You stop asking the world to tell you who you are. You live from the inside out, not perfectly, but honestly. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who you admire, not who you envy, not who you were told to be. Who you truly are, beneath the fear, beneath the conditioning, beneath the performance." And becoming that person doesn't make life painless, but it makes pain meaningful. You suffer less because you no longer fight reality as much. You no longer insist that life be different in order for you to be okay. You meet it. You dialogue with it. You learn from it. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" And you start asking, "What is this asking of me?" That shift alone changes everything. Because now, when difficulty comes, and it will, you don't collapse. You don't regress into the old identity. You stay present. You breathe. You listen. You respond instead of react. This is awakening embodied. And from this place, something subtle but profound happens. Your presence becomes medicine. Not because you preach, not because you try to awaken others, but because you are no longer fragmented. People feel safer around someone who is whole. Not louder, not perfect, whole. Your honesty gives others permission to be honest. Your boundaries teach others what self-respect looks like. Your calm unsettles chaos, not by force, but by contrast. This is how awakening ripples outward, quietly, naturally, inevitably. And now, as we come to the final moments of this journey together, there is one last invitation, not from me, but from your own soul. It is asking you something simple, but not easy. Will you stop postponing your life? Will you stop waiting until you are healed enough, confident enough, spiritual enough, ready enough? Because readiness is not something that arrives. It is something you choose. Every time you choose truth over comfort, every time you choose presence over distraction, every time you choose alignment over approval, you are already awakening. And if you've stayed with this narration until now, it's because something in you recognized itself in these words, not intellectually, viscerally, like a memory being stirred rather than a lesson being learned. So let's anchor that recognition. If this journey reflected something real inside you, comment, "I am awakening." Not as a declaration of arrival, but as an acknowledgement of movement. Because awakening is not a finish line, it is a way of walking. In the end, you don't wake up to escape the world. You wake up to meet it, fully, honestly, without armor. You don't become someone else. You remember yourself. And that remembering, that is the awakening. Thank you for walking this path with me.